want to make sure this last talk is light, because I think when you go to a restaurant and you have a great main menu, which you had in main course, which you had with the last speeches, you should leave with a sorbet that you eat last, so you have a sweet taste and you don't feel blown up. So I'll make sure we do it that way, but at the same time I think it's powerful, because it's about a topic that is relevant to each and all of you, and I think it's something that everyone in this room would name a key pillar to happiness. Because what we're going to talk about is the power that lies in your friendships and how you can unlock it. First, I'd like to take a step back first and just think about relationships that you build with other people. They're very powerful and probably one of the main success factors out there. If you think about any opportunity or any situation where you had a chance for a career advancement or an opportunity opened, it was almost always linked to a relationship you built with someone. Think about a job that you got. You had to go to an interview, right? You had to build a certain bond and relationship with your interviewer. And if it was a positive bond, he gave you a pass and you received the offer probably. Same thing if you want to start your own company. You want to launch a startup. You need to come up with an idea first, right? And how do you get an idea? It's not just in the air somewhere. Probably you talk to a friend who inspired you, or someone was complaining about a certain problem. So what you realize is, by interacting with people and by building relationships, you get opportunity exposure. Same thing for consultants. Think about a McKinsey partner, for instance. He doesn't win projects just because he has a great LinkedIn profile or because he sends cold emails or something. He builds relationships, he builds trust with people, and thereby he gets the mandates. So we should think about relationships in terms of opportunity universes. So whenever you meet someone, you build a great relationship, you also have access to new opportunities. And today we want to focus on one vital chapter within that relationship building, which is how you can collaborate with friends to get exposure to more opportunities and reach goals that otherwise you wouldn't be able to reach. And maybe we should look at evolution first. What you see here is on the left-hand side, you see birds. What birds do is they have a typically vertical transmission in terms of how they learn. So they learn a lot from their parents. And that's something that reminds me of students. Students are always looking for coaches, for mentors, for leaders. And that isn't wrong. But what I'd like to inspire you to become more is like these cuties on the right, the chimpanzees. Because what they do is they have a lot of horizontal transmission. Horizontal transmission means they learn a lot from their peers, from the friends, from the people that they spend most time with. And I think that's the exact same thing we should try to adopt more. And maybe I can tell you a little bit about my story. I actually studied here, as I mentioned, and when I first got here, I knew no one, basically. So social circle-wise, I started from zero. And then you know how it works, like you mix and mingle, and you meet new people, and then you realize that like-minded people attract each other, and you have all of these little subgroups forming within a year. Same thing for me, met good friends and was a group of 9 friends in total, and we did all the things that friends do, so going out, traveling together, partying together, being silly all day long. And fast forward to today, we still do the same things, probably we're sillier than ever before, but we've also set up a few routines and structure that help us become better as individuals with the help of the group. So we have strategy weekends where we just provide each other with detailed feedback that no one else will be able to give you. So we just log into a room and we talk about strength, weaknesses, opportunity, threats, everything that's important for you to develop. Everyone has a certain industry that he specializes on, that he knows a lot about, and we make sure that we coach and mentor each other so that we are able to have access to someone who knows so much about his industry and we don't even have to study it ourselves. And when we first came here, I felt a little bit like you were fighting your battles alone. You had your friendship group, you were coming back, you could complain about things, went out again, and you fought your own battles. And now it feels much more like someone got your back covered. And I figured out that that's a dynamic which Napoleon Hill addressed first in the 20th century already, when he interviewed the most successful leaders in the USA. And he realized that what these leaders have in common is that they're all part of a mastermind group. And And I would like to give you a few hints, inspirations, how you may also be able to set up a mastermind group with your friends. You realize that there will be 4 steps for you to set up the group. And the steps go as follows. That first, you just need to come together and exchange. You need to talk about what your visions are. What is the foolish dream that links all of you together? And when you do that, you realize because like-minded people attract each other, there's something you all have in common. You may be different in terms of your skill sets, but there is something that you all have in common. And you need to figure that out first. Once you've done that, you should try to establish awareness, trust, and appreciation for each other's strength, which is the second point here. So that means, what does everyone bring to the group that helps you reach the vision? And it's different because every individual has different kind of skill sets. But you need to make sure you're aware of what these are and then bring them together. And what we need to realize here is it's not about absolute advantages. It's about relative advantages. And what that means is, here we had an example. So let's say we have Chris and we have Max. What they can do is the first scenario. They can both split their time 50-50. They can study, it's just an example, entrepreneurship and finance. And Chris can become 20% better in entrepreneurship every year and 15% better in finance. Max, if he splits his time, he can only become 10% better in entrepreneurship and 12% better in finance. So that means Chris has an absolute advantage in both. But if they come together now and they say, hey, look, you're passionate about entrepreneurship anyway. I'd like to fully focus on finance. Then they're able to have rates of improvements which they otherwise wouldn't achieve. So even though Max in the first example had a disadvantage, an absolute disadvantage, now he can become 24% better each year, which is a higher rate of improvement than Chris would have if he had to split his time. So it makes sense to come together, be aware of what your strengths are, and then you may ask, what's the advantage if I then split it up like that? The advantage is you can then specialize and build expertise. We know that no one ever got extremely successful by trying to be good at everything. You can't be good at everything. So try to find a niche, try to find this one thing that you are best at, that you can be world class. And we look at 3 things here in terms of specialization. It's professional knowledge, personal knowledge, and then slightly different to that, it's individual networks. And to give you an example of the first 2, you know these 2 fellas? It's Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. Probably Warren is the most successful investor in the world, and that's why he is so popular and so famous. And Bill Gates is probably, no one knows more about software and technology than he does, right? And what they do is they just focus on their respective areas. So they focus on the thing that they are best at. So Warren would spend all day reading annual reports and trying to become good in financial investments. And the opposite is true for Bill. But what's interesting is Warren probably knows more about software and technology than anyone in this room. And the opposite is true as well. So Bill knows a lot about financial investments, even though he doesn't study it at all. And why is that possible? Because they are very close friends, and they always say how much they learn from each other. Imagine you could go out with Warren Buffett every week and have lunch with him, and have him tell you about the industry and what's happening. No professor could ever tell you something again about finance, right? So because they bonded together, what they've done is they formed a mastermind group. So when one mind means the second one, they form a third invisible mind, which is the mastermind. And they thereby specialize in certain sectors and educated each other. Then we come to the third point. The third point is individual networks that you can build. And what that means is, if you come together with a mastermind group and you specialize on certain verticals, which you have friends in anyway. For example, in our case, one guy knows a lot of journalists anyway. One guy, he's very entrepreneurial. He loves all the techies, all the coders. And another guy, he's really into fashion. So he has a lot of fashion friends. So everyone builds a network in a different industry, and you then come together. And what you're then able to achieve is you have an open network as opposed to a closed network. Closed network means you're a group of bankers, every banker knows the other banker, you just hang out with each other and you don't have an open mindset for anyone who's outside of your group. That's a closed network. You can't help each other, you know each other anyway. An open network, as opposed to that, means that you're a connection point between other networks. So if you with your group of friends say, okay, we each have a network in different industries, you can draw all of these industries together. And then you form an open network. And what's interesting is, you can see that a relative performance is much higher for people who have large open networks as opposed to people who just stick to small closed networks. And that is measured by compensation, evaluation, promotion. So that is a big success factor. Just as an example, let's say you have a friend and he's working in fashion and he wants to set up his own blog or website, and he's never touched a computer because he's only on Instagram, right? So you're able to connect him with your group to someone in the coding, in the entrepreneurial space. So he can set up a website for that person. And thereby you're able to help both, because the coder has a job, the person who wants to have a website now has someone who probably does it at a cheaper rate, and you help both of them. So you're able to help people much more if you have an open network. And then, what you need to do last, obviously, is make sure you exchange. Only if you exchange, you're able to help each other. So you need to make sure whenever you meet, just give everyone 5 minutes to tell about what's going on in the industry, what's going on about the thing that they know most about. So you basically have exchanged to someone who spends all his day studying one thing and who's probably in the top 1% amongst the people. And you have access to his brain without having to study it yourself. So make sure you set up routines for exchange, that you have regular calls, that you meet regularly. And one thing that plays into that is feedback. Feedback is super important. And no one's able to give you feedback the same way your friends can, because no one knows you as well. Even your parents, even with your parents, you would behave differently than when you're amongst your friends, right? So no one's able to give you better feedback, and no one feels like they're in a position to give you feedback otherwise. Strangers, they don't want to offend you. They don't want to be open with you when they talk about these things. Only friends will do that. So you make sure when you exchange that feedback is one of the things that you exchange about. And if you follow these 4 steps, that you say, firstly, you create a common vision that you all share. Secondly, you create awareness, respect, and appreciation for everyone's traits and strengths. Thirdly, you specialize on those 3 things. And then fourth, you exchange about it. Then I think you're able to reach goals with this group that you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach on your own. And what I hope everyone leaves this room with today is a motivation to get together with your friends, to just share your dreams, to just share what you all want to reach together, and to realize that one of the most inspirational sources of learning may not be that far away, but it may actually be the people that you spend most time with. And if you do that, then I think one famous saying is not true anymore, which is, you're the average of your 5 closest friends. That's what people like to say. But if you form a mastermind group, if you collaborate with people and you come together, then you're able to have a sum that is greater than the sum of its parts. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention.